everyone, and welcome back to my channel. It's Fatmata here from Traditionally Inspired Meaningful Art, and today I wanted to talk a bit about my Mother's Day dress that I made for myself, and it was to complete my sort of family set. So I will get into this make in just a moment. I want to quickly tell you what I am wearing. Last time I showed you this finished garment, I didn't get to show it to you on. So this is McCall's 8147, and it is this gorgeous top. I made view C, which is what the model has on. Here it is, super floaty and dreamy in this incredible viscose fabric. So I'm happy with it. It is short. Came out much shorter than I was expecting it to turn out. My belly button is about here, so it is short. So for tucking it in, different things. I think if I were to make this again, I would lengthen it just a smidge, maybe by 1.5 inches, 2 inches or so, to give me a length that maybe I would like a little bit more. But otherwise, I think it is simple to put together, easy breezy. I also like that I feel like if I were to extend this pattern, it would just skim the hip, and I could always sort of flare that out a little bit more. But I could see this being a lovely summer dress pattern by just lengthening that and sort of extending, you know, that side seam. And I do plan on doing that. So I can't wait to show that to you. All right, so about the dress that we're here for. So I shared this dress on my Instagram because I'm participating in Me Made May this year, and my pledge is not only to wear a Me Made garment every day, but also to post on Instagram. So I've been sharing it over on my stories. Why I did not just choose to put it on my feed boggles my mind, but I'm on day like 24 right now, so I figure I'm just gonna keep putting them all in the stories, and I have a highlight. But I wore this on Mother's Day, and I was just so thrilled to work on it and get it done in time to wear with my kiddos on Mother's Day as a little treat and gift to myself. If you watched this space back in April, I participated in Selfless Sew April, and I made a top for my husband, I made a dress for my daughter, I made a shirt for my son, and they were all matchy, and I wanted to be in the club too, okay? But there wasn't time to sew my garment, so I got to mine in May, and here it is. The last time that I shared with you about this, I was like so distraught because I was looking at the fabric. I had about 2 yards left of this amazing wax print fabric, and after making all of their garments, I had maybe just over 2 yards, but I think about 2 yards left. And Ankara fabric is not wide in the width. You have about 45 inches that you're working with, so it's not ample amounts of fabric. Especially with such a bold print like the one that you see before you and a border print, there were a lot of different factors that were sort of working against me with having that last bit of cut of fabric remaining. And I'm a pattern matcher. I must do it, especially with something this bold. So I had a particular way that I wanted this done, and by golly, we were gonna do it. So I wanted to just kind of show you the dress in all of its glory, and then we're going to get into the details and how I was able to stop shedding tears and actually make this fabric work for me and get a full dress out of it, which I didn't think was actually possible. So I'm really proud of this, flaws and all, but we can get into a bit of those details in just a moment. Can you see it? It's like this gorgeous Ankara fabric that is very lustrous. And I'll see how this goes. Hey friends, so I just wanted to show you what I'm trying to figure out right now. I have not lost hope. I showed you all that I really wanted to revisit the B6702. I really want this to be my shirt dress pattern, and I know I said that I don't think I could get a full dress out of this, but I'm gonna try again. I have just gone into my stash and I pulled out additional fabrics that I was hopeful that I could get some sort of match. And I think the cobalt is just such a striking blue that unfortunately, hopefully the camera is picking it up, but these are not quite the same. And I think I'd much rather do a contrast than than to pick something that sort of looks like I tried, but it didn't work. You know what I mean? So it's too close, but not close enough to work. And I don't like that. This is a navy. I think it's reading black on camera, but it's more like a really, really deep midnight navy. And there isn't any navy in this print, actually. It's like a nice emerald green, the golds, and this aubergine sort of color, which is a really good match to this cotton sateen fabric that I have. It's a pretty decent match. And but it is like a contrast, right? So that would be very obvious. I don't know. I don't know what I've decided here. So I have my bodice piece here, and in this pattern the button front placket is separate, but I think what I would do is what I often do with patterns. If the placket is separate, I sort of measure like how much more width I would need, and often if I add or tack on about 2 inches, it kind of works. I'm gonna of course go back in and do the math. Honestly, I think if I put the pattern piece here with this like additional about 2 to 3 inches to spare and interface this section and folded it in twice, that usually works for me. So I'm just putting it here with that sort of plan in mind. So if I did the pattern piece here so that I could get this medallion and all of that beautifulness, which my family, the rest of their makes, has this motif in the bodice front, I think I would want that. And this is the back pattern piece. This is just a really large section of the cobalt by itself. So I think I would flip that upside down and make use of that. This is the center of the motif here from the bottom. Sort of have that as a guide. Imagine this would be flipped over because it's cut on the fold. And then I think that gives me just enough of the motif here at the end to cut this out as well. I don't know if you can see it. To cut this out as well from here. So that at least lets me know that in this little strip, I can at least get the bodice front and the bodice backs out correctly. I think I would try and figure out if throughout the rest of the fabric elsewhere, but I think I want the border print, like this bottom piece, to be the yoke. So I would, after I've pressed it, of course, use that to cut out the yoke, and then I would use maybe one of these cotton sateen fabrics to be the inner yoke. Alright, so let me see if I could do it with the borders at the bottom and the medallion in the center. So if I wish Ankara fabrics were whiter, but you know, it is what it is. So I think I could do it. This is the center of this medallion piece. So let's say if I put it here as the center, I get almost there. Well, it's about 2.5 inches shy of that pattern piece. Now, that's not terrible. That's actually giving me more than I thought I would get out of this. So there are some other cut lines for view A. So let me look at view A. View A is a 3/4 length sleeve right here. So that's not that bad. I could still fit the sleeve there, which is giving me hope. I'm thinking about revisiting Simplicity S8834, which has been a really good, straight, slightly A-line skirt pattern for me in the past. So that's what I think I would go with for this. For the skirt, I think this is the skirt front. I would need, again, about 2 inches to serve as the button band for the front. So let's say if this were folded to match, just so I have them symmetrical here. I would cut out the skirt front here, and then cut the skirt back this way on the fold, like that. That's what I'm thinking. So you see how it sort of just meets, and I would sort of fill in this line to make it a line, and then make sure that I capture the border print at the bottom for the base. Okay. I think I might actually have to go from the very top of the fabric. I don't think it's wide enough actually. From the top. The issue that I'm having with this, which I also experienced when making the other garments out of this fabric, is that the way that it's printed on the cotton is not, it's not fully on grain. So as you can see, I'm getting this like puckering here. And I think if I match it up at the bottom, which I would want because this is where the cuff is going to be, it's going to be noticeable in my opinion. If I match it up here, then I get this sort of like bunching up, curling happening here. If I match it up along this side edge here, that was cut on grain, then it like pulls the fabric up on this end. I've cut out the bodice back and the bodice fronts, which I did in single layers. And again, fiddled a lot to make sure that the pattern placement was as symmetrical as possible. It's not 100% there. Like these medallions in theory should have matched up, but you can see it's like shifted a little bit because you see the start of the other one, but not here. I know, very minor, like trust me, I recognize that. You see how this is here and then it's higher up because the green isn't showing on this one. Any hoosers. Stuff that you won't really care about when the garment is done, but when you're cutting it, it can drive you a little bit crazy. So I'm going to stop letting it drive me crazy. I'm going to focus more on matching the bottom because I think that's going to be more impactful. When I'm actually wearing the garment, you're just going to notice that, oh, it's kind of mirrored the sleeve, but you're not going to take into account like how much it's mirrored or how much it matches. So I'm not going to worry too much about that. So in the front, it has this print here. It's almost like a high-low hem there. And in the back, this is where we had to get creative. All right, we had to get creative in the back here with the fabric. The fabric wasn't necessarily printed on grain. So anytime I would line up the selvages, the fabric pattern placement was completely skewed and far off. So I had to kind of just take my time, grit my teeth, and go ahead and cut it single layered and make sure that I was matching up the prints the way that I wanted. And I'm very happy that I did because I was able to match up those prints beautifully even within the sleeve. So as you can see here, the sleeve, if I had all the fabric that I wanted, this particular point would have been like the center of the sleeve, you know, fully mirrored. It ended up having to be a little bit shifted, but not a worry at all. What I find is that so long as you stick with symmetry, it doesn't really matter what you do. When it's symmetrical, it just looks intentional and it works. So we went with that. As you can see in the skirt, what was hilarious to me was that I spent, I mean like over 30 minutes in this very room on the floor with this fabric laid out. I wanted to make sure that I can get a bodice out of this in addition to a full skirt. So I mapped everything out and I'll tell you in a second what patterns I was using, but I was laying out the pattern pieces and I had finally committed to like how I was going to lay everything out. And it was going to use sort of like the cross grain of the fabric, so between the selvages. And then when I was upstairs actually cutting the stuff, I completely disregarded all of the calculations I had made in this very room. And when I was cutting it out, I was thinking to myself, why would I use the cross grain and then miss out on an opportunity to have this continual line with this pattern down the front? You know, I was like, that's silly. So that led to some other choices needing to be made, where in the back, I didn't have enough to, again, continue that because this was along the border. So I just stopped short where I could and had to use other parts of the fabric for the remainder of the skirt, which led us to this beautiful sort of motif here. I had to, unfortunately, cut the yoke out of just the solid sort of cobalt blue section of the print because I couldn't get any more of this medallion sort of motif without sacrificing other things. So I went for it. So that was the solid sort of cobalt blue section of the fabric. So then we had to piece together what was left of like the center bits of the fabric, which included this huge medallion. So there were two different pieces. And I went ahead and made sort of like this bottom part of the skirt. What I'm really proud of is that I had to piece together so many different pieces to get this little tail bit at the end here. And there were moments that made me want to tear up a little bit because I was like, you made a plan and then switched it without testing that plan. And that plan doesn't really seem to be working out for you. Let me tell you what happened. When I cut this sort of top portion of the skirt, because of the shape of it, it is quite A-lined, right? So it sort of curves out. That meant that the center portion of the fabric that was remaining was cut into a bit. And in some spots, it was cut into way more than I had accounted for. So I have some images of what the fabric looked like, so I'll pop them up on the screen. And I had to go back to like put my quilting hat on. Okay, put my quilting hat on. And I was like, I'm going to use all of the scraps that I have and I'm going to make this work because it's going to be a dress. So you'll see in the images, I found a way that I could go ahead and sort of like slot in some fabric in the cut out spaces. And I did it on both sides of the fabric because both sides of the needed it. And I pressed everything beautifully. It laid super flat. I didn't want to do any top stitching on this section to draw any more attention to it. So I just left it like that. And I actually feel like it is such a seamless finish. I was super, super proud of it. From there, again, symmetry was my friend. I was, trying to figure out how I want to align all of the pieces. So what I ended up doing was, since the medallion motifs were not sort of centered, like I didn't have the two like medallion pieces that I had, they were not in the same sort of location on the fabrics that I had. So as you can see here, one of the sections has a lot more of the blue space, and that's sort of just how the fabric turned out. So being that symmetry is my friend, I went ahead and just cut one of the panels and put it on either side to make it feel a bit more intentional. Those were added with flat felled seams, and I think it is quite a clean finish. I love the buttons that I use. They came from my stash. I had thrifted these in a bundle some time ago, and they are much larger than the size of button that I would have wanted to use. They're like 3/4 of an inch large. So in my mind's eye, I would have traditionally probably wanted to use it for like a sweater or something a bit more substantial or thicker, but it actually works beautifully with this print. It picks up a lot of those warmer sort of, it looks chocolatey, but more like maroon sort of tones throughout the fabric. So I think it's actually a perfect match, but I had enough of them and that is why I selected them in the end instead of some of the sets of gold buttons that I have in my stash. I've turned the dress inside out because honestly, I would say the finishes on the inside are probably my favorite thing about this dress, and the fact that I took my time to make it super special. I use this awesome, really bright yellow bias binding to close off the neckline. As I mentioned, I knew I didn't have enough fabric to actually do the full-on collar and collar stand that's within the B6702. So instead, I took the scraps that I had, I cut them into 3-inch strips, and I folded that over and ruffled it, you know, gathered it in and made this awesome sort of pie crust collar, which I attached right sides together, and then went ahead and bound the neckline using this awesome bias binding. Initially, I had stitched in the ditch to catch it on the inside, and it was ugly. It was so terrible. So I unpicked all of that stitching and just went ahead in with needle and thread and hand sewed that in place, and I love it. It's just such a clean finish. In the back there, I use a cotton sateen fabric from my stash to do a burrito style method for the yoke. The B672, they have like a faux burrito style. It's a lined sort of yoke. However, once I made my husband's shirt, and that is S8753, when I made that, those instructions actually have you do the burrito style method where you roll up the front and back pieces and then flip the yoke facing and attach it at the shoulder seams and then like roll everything back out. The actual burrito style method where you make the burrito. And I'm never going back. I'm never going back. So I fished out that pattern and actually used the instructions to do the burrito style method in this, because I do not believe that's how they instruct you to do it in the Butterick pattern. Throughout this make, everything was flat felled seamed. So I was really excited again to continue using that. And I did go ahead and serge the arm side. I think that's the only time I used my serger in this entire project. And that for me is something that I'm often really proud of, because it shows that I'm willing to utilize some of the other seam finishes that I'm learning and that I know. I also sewed each of the buttonholes twice. So I allowed my sewing machine to complete the buttonhole, and then I just pressed the pedal again and sewed over it again. And I believe that these are much nicer buttonholes than ones that I usually get, and I hope that you can see that, but they're just a lot crisper and more defined. I love the darts that are in the B6702. That's one of the reasons why I love the shaping of it. So it has back darts and it has front darts as well, and it's not a bust dart from here. It comes actually from the waistline. So I really like it, and hopefully you can see it in the line drawings how that is done. So I really love the shaping there. In the S8834 skirt, there are no darts in the front, but there are 2 darts in the back, and I didn't even bother trying to align like the darts on either side. So when I actually started putting these 2 patterns together after I had constructed the skirt and had constructed the bodice, I was like, that doesn't line up. And I didn't even allow myself to rest on that for more than 2 seconds. I said, oh, it doesn't line up. And I moved right on, because who cares? Who cares? Especially in a make like this. It just is not noticeable enough for me to have allowed myself to spend more than those 2 seconds on it. So I moved on. And while we are here, I wanted to show you all of that seaming in the skirt. So I told you we had so much going on here. And again, this is the inside of the fabric. So I love how neat it looks. That's something I'm really proud of. So here's where I had to attach that wedge of fabric. And I still think that looks quite clean. Here's the other side too. Still quite neat. And then otherwise flat felled seams throughout. When I don't have like the exact matching color threads in my serger, I much prefer using another sort of seam finish, whether that's a French seam, flat felled seams, etc., because I think having that matching thread really elevates garments. So I'm really happy about that. On the bottom, because it's a high-low hem and the back hem is quite curved, I did go ahead and use bias binding. So this is, I believe, a 5/8 of an inch or so, a little bit wider, maybe an inch, bias binding. And yeah, I just think it made such a neat and clean finish. I just used the bias bindings that are in my stash. I felt like the green picked up on some of the green that's in the fabric, so I went ahead with that because I had a size that fit, and I like having the thicker bias binding on the bottom because I didn't have to sort of fold the fabric on itself multiple times to hem it. I feel like I was able to preserve as much length as I could, which was really important to me with this make since I was dealing with very limited fabric to begin with. As you can see from the front, now that it's inside out, this dress does technically have pockets. Unfortunately, these pockets are closed for business right now. I did go back in after trying on the dress with the pockets open. I did not like it at all. It does that thing that pockets do on my body shape sometimes where they just like stick out, and I think it's because of where I placed them, because I wanted to ensure that I could anchor it into the waistline. I closed them with a basting stitch, so if ever I needed them in an emergency, okay, I could like pop it open with my finger as I do with like ready to wear garments that have the pockets but have them sort of stitched closed. So that's where I am. It makes me really sad because it took so much additional time for me to work out putting the actual pocket in there, and I was proud that I was able to do it, but I ultimately chose not to keep them in, or not to keep them functional, I should say, for the meantime at least. So that is the story behind my Mother's Day dress. I'm just so extremely proud of this, and the fact that I squeezed it out of the fabric that I had left and made the best use of it and made something not just wearable but something that I'm very proud of, and took my time with the finishes. So we are now a matchy set, and that's just the way I like it. I will say my husband has worn his shirt a number of times, which has blown my mind and makes me really extremely happy. He might actually get something else out of me one of these days. So I'm really excited about that. My kids have worn their makes a number of times as well, and that's been amazing. For Mother's Day, I wore this and I went out with my kiddos and my mom, so we were matchy together. We went to the National Harbor out here, and yeah, folks loved the dress. We got so many compliments. I think everyone loves to see a matchy set. It's so fabulous. And I think this print in particular is very striking and very bold. So my dad saw me in this dress and he was like, "That's really nice." And that was a high compliment. I mean, like he said more words, but he was really impressed. And I was like, "Really, Dad? You're just saying that because you want something. You want me to make you something? I'll make you something. Don't worry. You don't have to butter me up, but keep doing it." It was great. It was great. It was great. It was great. Any hoosers, I'm super excited about this make. Thank you all for the lovely compliments. I think a couple of you, saw it over on Instagram, and I got some really great feedback from it there. And for anyone who saw my other video where I was really sad when I thought I wasn't gonna actually be able to make a dress out of this because I'm a dress girl. But I did it. I did it, y'all. So I'm excited about that. Turned out well. All's well that ends well, as they say, right? So that is basically it for me today. I just wanted to come on and kind of share with you my Mother's Day dress. I hope you've enjoyed that little review of it. and the clips of the making and sort of the road to actually getting this dress done. As you can see, we had many make it work moments, and I'm glad that instead of getting frustrated and feeling like I give up, I can't do this, I was like, I want this dress too bad to let that stop me. So if we're gonna have to piece together a skirt and figure it out, we're gonna do it. And I'm gonna make sure it's behind me though, so I don't have to see it, that's for sure. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Stay creative, friends. Bye-bye.